Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode. I'm recording this in early July, and my Instagram feed has been filled with physicians wishing new residents, kind of a welcome to the journey of being a physician. And that had me thinking, what about our new attendings? What about our people who have now graduated from residency, graduated from fellowship, and are newly launching into the world? We celebrate them at graduation, but think back for yourself. What was it like for your first few days, your first few weeks, months, maybe even your first few years as a new attending? And what do you wish that you could have known? And even if you've only been out of residency or fellowship for a year, I can guarantee you that you can come up with a list of things that you wish you had understood, when you were first getting started. So that's what today's episode is all about. Whether you are, 1 year out, whether you are 20 years out, I think I calculated, I think I'm an R17 now or something like that. I don't know. I didn't do that right. Anyway, regardless, 10 things that I wish I knew as a new attending. As you listen, I encourage you to, really sort of dig in and figure out, have I learned this? Do I understand this now? Am I practicing this now? And if not, uh, I invite you to join in, right? To go ahead and learn that now, because it is never too late. It is never too late for us to improve our experiences. And if you're relatively fresh out, take a look at this and really soak it in. Because when I talk to physicians who've been out in practice for, more than 5 years, there are so many habits that formed early on in their attending careers that they wish they hadn't picked up, right? And most of us pick up these things during medical school, during residency. If you already struggled with boundary setting and people pleasing before you got to medical school, which you probably did if you're here listening to me, we have to unlearn these, but we have to realize that those habits became more and more entrenched during that time because of the way that medical training operates. So, right or wrong, that's a different conversation for a different day. But today, let's talk about 10 things that I wish I knew as a new attending. All right, these are in no particular order, so I'm just going to run right through the list here. Number 1, you will always look more calm and more organized to other people than you feel inside. And that's good in that they want to be able to look to you, to lead them, to trust them. They want to be able to ask questions, whether that's staff or patients or trainees. But it also means that they can't tell when you're struggling. They can't tell when you need help. They don't know what is going on inside. Okay. They see you as superhuman, as someone who doesn't have needs and who doesn't struggle. And so you're going to have to speak up for themselves. You're going to need to ask for help. You're going to need to set clear expectations with people, whether that's staff again or trainees, setting expectations for patients as well. And sometimes you're going to need a coach for performance. If you are trying to teach, someone else to help you with something, right? You're trying to delegate some tasks. You're going to have to check back with them. It's important to you and it may be completely new and they just don't get it. When you coach for performance, you're going to make it all better. Okay. Somehow that was all number 1. Number 2, this is a gross generalization, but I'm assuming that most of us went to programs that wanted us to succeed, right? Medical schools that wanted us to succeed, residencies that wanted us to succeed. Now, of course, we've all heard stories of times and places where that didn't happen. But if we are coming from that place, right, coming from that lens where we were in a group of people who wanted us to succeed, we need to understand that our working jobs are different. Our working jobs want us to see patients, usually as many patients as possible, and to capture as much complexity as possible, because the more patients we see and the more complex the concerns, the higher the billing. And because most of us work in the insurance world, right, the higher the billing, the more money comes in. That is the in and out functionality of business. And so, yes, your job might want you to succeed, but their primary mission is to get you to see as many patients as possible and to code for as much complexity as possible. We have to understand that. Their business model is not built around taking care of you as a human. It's not built around watching out for your workload. Those elements are gone. And I don't say that from a cynical perspective anymore. I think there's a place for that. I think that there are definitely so many examples we can see where organizations are just willing to churn through their staff and burn them out, and they don't really care. I think that that exists. And I want to assume, right, that a lot of the time, they just have no idea because they are not in the rooms with us, right? Our CEOs, our managers, they are not in the room with us, right? They don't understand the human emotional drama that goes on in the room, right? So we need to understand that from your job's perspective, right? Your employer's perspective, your role is to see as many patients as possible and to code for as much complexity as possible. And when you understand that, you will be better at deciding what is my capacity. And then you can make your own decisions around boundaries from that place, right? But let's not stay stuck in the assumption that they are out for your well being. Again, I say that now from a non-cynical perspective. Um, you might see it from a purely cynical perspective, especially if you're feeling very burned out, because that is literally a component of burnout. But the reality is that we need to understand that is how the business of medicine works in nearly all models. And we don't need to fight it. We need to understand that that element is there. And we need to decide, how am I going to take care of me? All right, number 3, you will have to learn or relearn how to say no. Nothing has gone wrong here. You have lived through medical school, you've lived through residency and maybe a fellowship, and your job was to say yes. Your job was to see a lot of people, to help anyone who asked, right? To go around and be the scut monkey. And, I'd love to see that change. And I don't know what it's like on the wards right now because I'm not in that world anymore. But your job was to say yes, to be pleasant, to be agreeable, to get excellent, excellent letters of recommendation and be, the team player in a way that is not sustainable for the long term. When we come out as attendings, we are going to need to learn how to say no. Relearn or learn. It depends on what your experience has been in the past. You can learn how to do this graciously, but kindly and clearly. No. It is a skill. It is something that we have to learn, right? Because you simply cannot say yes. The higher up the ladder you go, the more things people will ask you to do. And you get better and better at doing them. You get faster. And all of these things make it seem like you should just take it on. I'm telling you, you shouldn't. All right. There will always be more things to do than time to do it. Okay. You're going to have to be proactive and you're going to need to decide what is worth your time and what is not. So, I like to quote this study all the time. There was a study that was published in August of 2022 in Medical Economics. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, showing that a primary care physician needs 26.7 hours per day. I think I always fudge on the decimal point there. But let's just say 26.7 hours per day to take care of all of the needs of a primary care panel. So that includes well visits, it includes chronic disease management, it includes acute visits, it includes vaccinations and all the different kinds of preventative care that are out there. 26.7 hours per day of physician work. My friends, that is not doable, right? There is not 26.7 hours per day out of a 24-hour day. Now, with highly effective teams, that number dropped to something like 9 point something hours, right? Which means there is a whole hell of a lot of work that we could be delegating. But I just really want to point this out, that there's always going to be more things that you could keep yourself busy with at work and at home than there is time to do it. You're going to need to be selective. Okay. Next, I don't know what number we're on. Boundaries allow you bandwidth. People don't have to like your boundaries for them to be valid. And in fact, when you have been operating from a place where you don't usually put up any boundaries, where you always say yes, when you start, you will be uncomfortable and other people will have their feelings about it too. Sometimes those are going to be people being upset at you. Sometimes it's going to be people being surprised. Sometimes it's people who are just going to keep pushing and they're just going to keep ignoring your boundaries, right? They're just going to keep pushing, 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 pushing because they're trying to get, whatever their need is met. That is human behavior. It is human behavior to not like boundaries, especially when you are used to getting what you want from someone. Again, we can take that in a really cynical, manipulative light, but we can also just see that as that is just human behavior, right? When someone has a need that they need to have addressed, right? They will often work multiple different angles in order to get that. If you have children or have been around children, right, that that's just normal. That's just normal for humans, right? So if you are starting to practice boundaries, I just want you to expect that sometimes other people are going to be upset or disappointed. They're going to have their own feelings back. That doesn't mean that your boundaries are wrong. Your boundaries are still incredibly necessary. But without the boundaries, you will not have the bandwidth to be the kind of person that you want to be. And that's the person that you want to be at work, as well as the person that you want to be at home and in the rest of your human life. All right. I think we are on number 6. No one will watch out for you like you will. Which means that you have to start watching out for yourself. You need to pay attention to how much sleep you're getting. Are you eating healthy food? Are you getting time with your friends and family? Are you getting enough downtime? No one is going to keep track of that for you. No one is going to keep track of, duty hours in the same way that you have to as a resident. Now, sometimes with our electronic medical records, you're going to get someone tapping you on the shoulder, usually your chief, and saying, I noticed that you seem to be on Epic from, 9 p.m. until like 1 a.m. I noticed that you closed this chart, at 11:30 at nighttime. What's going on? Sometimes you'll get that. And, sometimes that's going to be well-intentioned and sometimes it's going to be less so. So there is that potential, but no one is going to do as good a job as watching out for yourself as you if you choose to value yourself. And that is really important. You need to treat yourself as the precious and finite resource that you are. You have a limited amount of time per day, just like all the other humans. And although you are very used to working long, long hours that just don't make any sense, you'll need to stop that outside of call situations, right? And certain unusual circumstances. If you work outpatient, right, you cannot continue to bring home hours and hours worth of charting, right? No one is going to make that better. No one is going to care about that more than you, even if someone is tapping you on the shoulder and noticing that you're working really late at night, right? We need to watch out for ourselves. All right, number 7. You're never going to be done learning. And that's a good thing, right? Because things change, right? We all hear about that statistic that something like 50% of what we learn in medical school is obsolete within 5 years. That's probably even worse now. I don't know. That's an old statistic, but you're never going to be done learning. And again, that's a good thing, right? We need to learn and grow as we move along. But it means that in order to be a good lifelong learner, you're going to need to learn differently than when you did as a student or a resident, right? You don't have hours to pour over medical journals and texts. And most of us are not in the position where we're going to be doing deep dives on like this obscure medical illness that no one's ever seen before, right? If you're in primary care, there are going to be limits to how far you feel comfortable working something up. And I know that that is not always possible in some of our settings. Sometimes we have to really expand our scope. And sometimes we just think that we do. But I got a little off track here with the point. You'll never be done learning, but the better that you take care of yourself, right? The better that you attend to your sleep and your well being and your exercise and all of those things, the more bandwidth you're actually going to have for curiosity and growth, which curiosity and growth actually help us learn things, right? We can stare at up to date for hours and hours trying to find information, but if you're super tired and frustrated and just cranky, right? And overwhelmed, you aren't really going to be learning. But if you are taking good care of yourself, if you are setting reasonable boundaries and limits, you are much better able to get curious and try and solve more complicated problems, try and learn, try and grow, try to expand your skills, whatever makes sense to you. If there's an area that you really want to explore and you really want to become better at, I see a lot of women in my generation who didn't learn that much about hormone replacement, right? Didn't learn that much about menopause and menopause hormone therapy because hormones were considered evil. That is an area of learning for so many of us. And it's something that I'm excited about, but I know that I need to maintain good boundaries and need to take good care of myself so that I can really learn this stuff instead of just kind of, I don't know, grabbing resources and trying to fake it, right? I really want to get good at that. And in order to do that, I need to take good care of myself so I have the bandwidth and capacity to grow. All right, number 8. This is a good one. The amount of administrative tasks within medicine will metastasize, especially if you continue to be willing to do them. Decide what you're going to do and what you're going to ignore, and then you got to stick with it. So, what am I lumping into this bucket? I was chatting with a client of mine, and we were talking about all of the new things that keep coming to the clinic of like, oh, from now on, you need to do this. And from now on, when they're scheduled for a cold, you're also going to have to work in this extra preventative care over here. And, just all of these little things that get added onto the plate. And very rarely does something come off of the plate. But also, we've got all sorts of other administrative tasks, right? There's all the portal management, right? The inbox, the CC charts, the results, all of those things need to be dealt with. Some of it needs to be dealt with by you, and some of it you might need a system, some of it you might need to delegate. But the more of it that you keep in your bucket, the more it will grow and grow and grow, and you won't have control over it. So you're going to need to decide, how do I choose to manage that? Because we are all individuals and we don't always have 100% choice over the way that, we do things here, but we do have control over how do I approach that, right? I might need to respond to results within 48 hours, but I might decide that I set aside time for my inbox, twice a day, or, that I only do it at a certain time of day. Like I can make those rules for myself. And I need to stick with it. When I see it from the lens of, I need to take care of myself, and I know that there's a certain volume of work to do, and I need to set some limits and boundaries, right? So that I can do the best I can with what I have, knowing sort of what my resources are, knowing what my limitations are, right? If I'm in a place where I have very little staff and very little support, it may be that I have to tell my patients, hey, if your results are normal, they're just going to come to you in the portal and I'm not going to send you a message about it, right? I might need to decide that for myself. I might need to tell people, for anything that's not urgent, I'm going to get back to you within a week. Um, I might need to send stuff to the nursing staff. Like there's any number of ways that we can do that. But when you take on feeling like you have to run all of the things yourself, you just won't ever be able to keep up. That's where that 26.7 or whatever hours goes in. And just to know that no one person, it's not you, right? It's not you that's struggling. It's that there is just too much work. There's too much work to do the way that we've structured things. As if we had a decision about it. Anyway, again, different podcast, different day. Number 9, really important here. You have more choices than you know. No one at work is going to lay this all out for you. So it helps to have safe spaces where you can explore and you can bounce ideas off someone that you trust and decide for yourself where your boundaries are, what you do, what you don't do. You might need to decide, hey, when someone comes in with back pain, the options that I'm going to give include this, this, and this, but it's not this, this, or this, right? We might need to decide for ourselves, hey, I don't offer that. I don't know, I'm just going to make up some examples. You might say, I don't do skin biopsies, right? I can't think of a circumstance where you'd be 100% required to do them by your clinic. Now, there might be lots of reasons why it's really inconvenient if you don't do skin biopsies, especially if you're in a rural place and I don't know, dermatology is 200 miles away. But you can decide for yourself what you will and won't do. No one is going to sit you down and ask you all the questions, right? They may just continue to put things on your plate. They may just continue to schedule things that you are not really comfortable with managing. They may just, double book you over and over again. You have the ability to say no to those things. And if you don't have any ability to say no or to set some limits or boundaries, then you need to ask yourself, is this a situation that I can stay in? I know, of course, there are many, many, many difficult circumstances that we might find ourselves in, and we may not have the flexibility or ability to leave a job. But I do think that it's important that we see that as a choice, right? I can think of very few circumstances where we don't have any choice about keeping or not keeping a job. Even the circumstance of, well, I have to work in this setting, I have to work in this state, in this kind of a clinic for X amount of years in order to repay my loans. We have to see that we actually do have a choice to exit that situation, to leave the state, to do whatever, and to pay back things. Now, that may not be a choice that you want to make, but it's really important for your brain that you recognize that it's a choice. That if I'm going to choose to stay here in this circumstance, then I realize I am making a choice to complete this commitment that I've made. But I'm going to take care of myself along the way. And when I get to the other side of that commitment, then I'm out of here, right? That is a choice that you might make. You might choose, you know what? I'm ready to leave. I need to leave for whatever reasons. I'm going to leave and choose to pay the money back because it is only money. I said it. You have more choices than you know, and it's important to have safe spaces to explore those choices. And those safe spaces are probably not going to be at work. So that is where coaching is incredibly helpful. That is where physician groups are incredibly helpful. That is where a therapist can be incredibly helpful. There are so many places where you can explore and find that safe space. You need to know, what is a safe space for me? All right, number 10. Your job in medicine is not to have all the answers. Your job is to synthesize the data. Your job is to offer potential options based on what we know right now. and help someone to the extent that you can. Now, there are some circumstances where you might be helping someone against their will, someone who is, I don't know, suicidal, someone who is unconscious, right? Someone who is actively dying in front of you or who is dead and you are coding, right? There are some circumstances where you are just kind of proceeding blindly, but for most of the time, we are dealing with competent adults or parents and legal guardians, right, of minors who need support, or vulnerable adults, or whatever the situation is. We are taking in their story, we are sorting it through our skilled expert analytics in our brain, right? We are synthesizing that with exam features, what we know, what treatments are available, and we are offering potential solutions to people. Very rarely is there only one choice. There might be one best choice, but a lot of the times there might not be, right? There are just different choices. Sometimes there's no great options. There's a lot of different circumstances there. My job is not to know the answer for all of the people. My job is to help sort through, diagnose, offer treatment options, and let the other humans decide. And not only do they need to decide on, what parts of the treatment plan they're going to participate, they're going to need to continue to decide to participate in it at home, right? When they leave my care. Um, Again, outside of, I don't know, hospital situations and such, when we are dealing with outpatient medicine, right? When we are offering and advising on treatment, let's say I've got somebody with high blood pressure and it's really high. It's a competent adult and they're not feeling any distress and they don't believe me that it's a problem, but they are competent. And I say, I think it's really important that we treat your blood pressure. I think it's really important that we do this evaluation. I think that this is really important because X, Y, and Z reason, right? I am not going to hold them down and put pills in their mouth, though. And yes, I can worry about them, but I need to recognize that my part of the job is to evaluate, synthesize the data, come up with a treatment plan, offer solutions, check for understanding, right? And they've got a job too. Sometimes they're not going to do their job in a way that I like, but it's not my job to force them. It's not my job to know absolutely everything, right? I don't know if they're going to leave and have a stroke or a heart attack. I don't know that. If I did, would I push on somebody harder? I guess so, but I am operating with what I know right now. Somebody with a blood pressure of 205 over 110 is high risk for a stroke, right? A stroke is bad for your body. It is bad for your brain, right? The thing I know right now is the best way to protect that person from a stroke is to work with them to bring down their blood pressure. That's what I know right now, but I don't know the future. I don't have that crystal ball. And it's not my job to have that crystal ball. My job is to do the best I can with what I know, including the veracity of the information coming at me, right? If I don't know an answer, I will look it up, and so will you, right? That's all okay. But we don't predict the future and we don't control the future. It's really important that we understand that. Yes, if I was doing surgery on somebody, like I am responsible for bringing my skills and expertise and doing the best that I can. I don't control all the outcomes. Yes, I could make a mistake. I could make a mistake that is based on weird anatomy. I could make a mistake based on I could make a mistake based on my own carelessness, right? Most of the time, that's not going to be the issue. And sometimes we have done everything right and stuff still goes wrong, right? Your job is not to be perfect, not to have all the answers. You are doing the best you can with what you know right now. And stuff will happen. Bad stuff will happen to people. Maybe that's number 11. Bad stuff will happen to people through no fault of yours. Yes, sometimes you're involved with it. Yes, sometimes you're affected by it. Yes, sometimes you're going to be blamed for it, whether it really has anything to do with you or not. But you cannot be perfect because no human can. It's really important that we understand that. So much of our anxiety comes from hypervigilance, comes from seeing bad stuff happen to people. And we internalize, sometimes from overt or covert messaging, that it's our fault, that our lack of knowledge, skills, or expertise contributed to that outcome. And we magnify that so much that we think, if only I triple check everything, if only I do everything myself, if only I know all the answers, right, and keep 100% up to date on all the conditions, right, if only I write the most careful note, then bad things won't happen to people. It's just not true. It's just not true. What else would you add to this list? What else am I missing? I'm really curious to hear from listeners. Drop me a line. I'm going to put my email address in the show notes. Uh, Send me a message if you're like, yeah, I think I wish that I had known XYZ thing. Great. Tell me. I'm really curious to know, what did I miss here? I know that not everyone has my same experience, right? Because of course, that's just how it goes. But I'm curious, do you have something that I also wish that I had known way back when? Now, it's funny because, of course, we think about these things, right? And hindsight works this way. If somebody had sat me down and told me all these things 14 years ago, I don't know that I would have listened. I don't know that I would have believed it, right? Because my perspective, my skills and experience, my knowledge was all so colored by, I don't know, kind of the rosy colored glasses of, well, you just do this and do this and do this. And, this is the way our job is. And you'll just work all these hours and you'll just be so happy. Most of my faculty were older white men, right? They had raised their families and didn't have tiny children and weren't looking at that part. And they didn't have 20 million medical resources. Like, their world was quite different. That's okay. It's okay. But ultimately, I don't know that we would listen to ourselves, but I do hope that we tune in now and we see how far we've grown, we see how far we've come, and we continue to be open to learning, especially learning, how do I make this life doable for me? How do I make this life sustainable? How do I make things easier on myself, knowing that I don't have an easy job, right? This job is never going to be easy, but I can absolutely make it easier. And leaning into these 10 principles, I think, really helps me to make my job easier, not easy. All right, my friends, that's what I have for you this week. Have a wonderful week. If you're in a part of the country where it is scorching hot because it is the summer and we keep having these devastating heat waves, it's not climate change. Don't call it climate change, is what they say. I think it's climate change. Anyway, I hope you're staying cool and have a wonderful week. Take care. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.